Okay. Welcome, one and all, to yet another episode of WIC TV. It's a cross-ideological space where we come together to talk about issues both political and cultural, from the silly to the serious. Gang, we have a pretty special guest today, Trace of Tracingwoodgrains on Twitter. He's worked with the Bar Pod, and he actually, I believe he interns at a law firm that has a lot to with free speech and things like that. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I did that over the summer, yes.
Over
Currently
this,
not
yeah,
working for anyone.
not currently, but you previously.
Correct.
Correct.
Just over the
Gotcha.
summer.
Okay. Well, hey, that's still more than most people. He made a post on Twitter on election night, and which is the reason I reached out, talking about the Kamala campaign and how he never felt that she appealed to him. We're going to talk tonight about centrism, what that is, what that looks like in modern politics when it comes to America, and what the machine is, something you've also talked a little bit about. So why don't you tell people who you are and what you do, give a little bit of an introduction, and then we'll just get into it. Sound good?
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead.
So like Wick was saying, I used to work for the podcast Blocked and Reported, and I do a lot of online writing. Typically, the stories that I cover when I'm doing long form investigative work, it's niche internet controversies where I take a deep dive into very specific, weird subject matter. Of here is this massive rabbit hole that nobody is really thinking of, and all of this stuff is going on that somebody needs to document. Where I look specifically for stories that if I don't tell those stories, nobody will. Most recently, it was the story of a Wikipedia administrator and multiple decades of misbehavior that has shaped much of what we see on Wikipedia today. So there are things like that in my writing. And other than that, I enjoy just doing cultural analysis and political analysis. I grew up Mormon, left about 6, 7 years ago when I created this handle. And a lot of my writing wrestles with coming out of a subculture and space that my whole family had been in for generations, that I liked, that I appreciated, that I thought was a pretty functional culture that turned out to not actually be rooted in truth, and come into a broader world that a lot of it seems broken, a lot of it seems chaotic. I don't really find structure and a place that I'm really satisfied with in the broader world. And I see sort of a divided and a broken culture. And so I am coming at it and analyzing it as a participant who has been on the outside in some ways. I was in the military for a while. I currently am in law school. And yeah, that's me.
So, former Mormon, former military. Same, okay? I grew up, I went on my mission in New Jersey, Cherry Hill, all that, did all that. I was a linguist at the cryptolinguist for 3 years, and then I was
No way.
I went to the DLI, Defense Language Institute, studied Chinese. I wasn't very good at it, so they reclassed me, okay?
No way. Hold on. Okay, I also went to DLI, studied Chinese.
Yeah? Well, you probably passed, unlike me. I got to the last test or whatever, and I got like a 2 plus 1
Rip.
plus 1 plus, so they didn't let me in. But
Rip.
yeah,
Yeah, that DLPT can be a pain. No,
it
that's hilarious.
was. Yeah, I did that for 3 years of my service, and then they put me as a grease monkey and gave me a wrench and told me to go fix the plane. So I did that. It was fun. But here we are. No, it's interesting, the parallels, right, of where people come from. But no, we have a lot in common, at least in that. And also your again, I've been following you for a little bit. A lot of your posts kind of speak to me. I am on the left, to be frank. I'm someone
Yeah.
who's voted blue all my life. I've been a Democrat pretty much all my life. Though I find myself less and less enamored with a lot of the way things are going, at least on the progressive side of things. So I guess to start our conversation, like, you call yourself a centrist. What do
Yes.
you mean by that? What is a centrist to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a fair question. People look at the word centrist and they say, fairly in some ways. Oh, that doesn't mean anything. Oh, it can mean whatever you want it to mean. Oh, it just means like fence sitting, sitting in the middle on whatever, yada, yada, yada. To me, what it means, first of all, I do consider myself a liberal in the international sense, not precisely in the US sense, although, close enough with that. I think that, things like free expression and free markets are valuable and are important and are worth defending. Um, and are worth defending specifically against forces both from the left and from the right. That is, I look at classical leftism, communism, socialism, and so forth, and think that a lot of it tends to be disastrous. I look at the far right, I look at ethno nationalism, I look at movements like that, and I see a lot of major issues with them. And I take my own inspiration from places like Singapore, where I think Lee Kuan Yew had a really piercing for me description of uh, what being in the center, at least economically, meant, and why he felt so strongly about that. So he said, "We believed in socialism and fair shares for all. Later, we learned that personal motivation and personal rewards were essential for a productive economy. However, because people are unequal in their abilities, if performance and rewards are determined by the marketplace, there will be a few big winners, many medium winners, and a considerable number of losers." That
Oh, I think I dropped for a moment. We reconnected. We should be good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. That cut off midstream, unfortunately. So I don't know how much of that my audience got. And it sucks. You can repeat it if you like, but we
Yeah,
literally like dropped halfway through.
no worries. I'll start with the Lee Kuan Yew quote then.
Please.
So he said, "We believed in socialism and fair shares for all. Later, we learned that personal motivation and personal rewards were essential for a productive economy. However, because people are unequal in their abilities, if performance and rewards are determined by the marketplace, there will be a few big winners, many medium winners, and a considerable number of losers. That would make for social tensions because the society's sense of fairness is offended. Our difficulty was to strike the right balance." And my attitude in general is that one should govern with the population one has, not the population one wants. One should pursue a market economy, but be willing to look at redistribution as it makes sense. And most of all, you should look to make things work. You should look for competence. You should look for excellence. You should, in America, you see the political left justify a lot of things through the lens of equality. You see the political right justify a lot of things through the lens of liberty. I want things to be justified through the lens of excellence. I want things to be justified through, does this work effectively? Does it push people higher? Does it push us collectively higher? Does it bring out the best in us? Then pursue that. Is it effective? Is it just fundamentally working? Fantastic. And that's a lot of what drives me. So, for example, as a quick example, in education, you see progressives in education focus on equality concerned measures, which can manifest in arguably positive things like universal pre-K, or can manifest in what I would consider starkly negative things like the removal of gifted programs or the weakening of selective schools. You see the right push for things like school choice, charter schools, so forth. And what I want to push is basically excellence in schools, this question of how to bring people closer to their ceilings, how to inspire people towards greater heights. What practically does a good, strong, effective education look like?
So, like, when you say it like that, when you phrase it like that, it seems eminently reasonable. Seems like everyone would agree with you. Like, hey, we want things to work. That's an excellent way to phrase it. Yet you get a lot, and I see a lot of people who echo sentiments such as yours receive a ton of pushback from both sides for various reasons. What are some of the why do you think that is? Why is America so focused on the extremes? I I worry that we are becoming, as a nation, and maybe I could be wrong in my hypothesis here, but the loudest voices are taking over rather than the ones that just want to get things done, make things work. Why, in your opinion? Why is this happening?
Yeah, I think there are some structural reasons that are somewhat fundamental to the structure of things, and I think there are some contingent reasons in terms of which faction is winning out, how, and why. So, in terms of broader structural reasons, people will point to the two-party system, and for a long time, I thought, oh, this is absolutely it. Like, if we could just get rid of the two-party system, it would all be fixed. And then I saw Trump come in and completely smash the Republican Party up and say, no, you guys are actually doing what I want now, not what you wanted. And saw the whole party mobilize to say, no, we don't want that, we don't want that, we don't want that, and then just kind of roll over and follow along anyway. And I saw Sanders almost do the same thing with the Democratic Party and almost, roll in and take over and do his thing. And both of those honestly gave me a lot of conviction that we wind up more or less with the system that we want. That if a system is functional, if a party is functional, if it's serving the needs of enough people, look, parties are just organizations created to win elections. And so, why are things winning out? I mean, the contingent reason with the two parties is that if you identify as left or right, and this is one reason I don't, the person who is most left and the person who is most right, and can say, oh yeah, I exemplify the values of this hardest, I am the purest of this, like, it is very hard to do anything other than say, well, I'm halfway along this person's values. Like, yes, this person's purer than me along those values. And yes, I agree with him, but, a little slower, a little less extreme, a little less things like that. And so a lot of people, if they are pushing towards left or right, are inevitably incentivized to frame themselves in the values of the person most extreme towards that. So I think a lot of that has been going on. But I think also the contingent thing is just people haven't really been organizing in the right ways. You saw recently on Reddit, the group r/neoliberal started at basically nothing. And then when almost everyone in the 2020 Democratic primaries was rooting for Warren, was rooting for Bernie, whatever, the neoliberal guys who are like, globalism, free trade, free markets, yada, yada, were like, Biden's fine, he's the best, whatever. And as soon as he won, a ton of energy and a ton of attention came focusing in on that because people love winners and people love that sort of thing. But then because all the young Democratic staffers lean progressive, Biden governed basically as Elizabeth Warren would have governed in a lot of ways. And that's just a reality of the people in the party. I could do a similar analysis for the Republican Party, but the core
Sure.
point is that whichever movement springs up, whichever movement is driving energy, driving ideas, driving points, that is the thing that is going to set the conversation for a lot of people because people like letting other people think about things. And the people who are most passionate and most organized, those are the people whose ideas will be put forward and whose ideas will start defining the shape of the discourse.
No, that's a lot there. I want to touch on a couple points, right? The idea of the exemplar, the pure rightist or the pure leftist. Um, I I'm skeptical a little that this has ever been a thing simply because what being on the left means, I think, is fundamentally changing. Like that idea of an exemplar, like today looks a lot different, at least to me, than it did in the Clinton era of what it meant to be on the left in American politics, at least in that context, right? Um, I I talked with some folks the other day. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Short Fat Otaku, Brianna Wu, a few others. And they mentioned something that I want to pick your brain a little bit about. One of the problems, at least on the left, is that a lot of the mechanisms that the left runs on, like the donors, the volunteers, the canvassers, etc., all these are run by kind of like an activist class almost. Would you agree with that statement? And
Yes, absolutely.
okay, well, and on that note, how do we ever become less extreme if these are the people that have been pulling the levers of power and continue to pull the levers of power? Like, how do we get people? And I guess this can apply to the right too. MAGA has been kind of taking over all the Republican levers of power as well. Um, what's the path forward? How do we fix it?
Yeah. So this is why I'm particularly hopeful for the Democratic Party right now is that nothing galvanizes a party like losing elections. When you lose, when you win, any internal divisions are sort of papered over and any sense of like unease or conflicts or whatever is sort of papered over and everyone's like, all right, we won, let's get to work. It's the other guys, like the other guys are at fault, yada, yada, yada. As soon as you lose, you're defined primarily by your opposition to the guys in power. You are the opposition party. They're doing something wrong. You want to do something right. And your job is to figure out which idea will be the most right and able to beat this. in order to beat them. And there's, of course, always people's underlying values there, but there are going to be different values that different movements and different candidates are channeling. And all people, even people who are ostensibly very firmly in one camp, have different values that are competing with each other, that some of them get accentuated sometimes, some of them get accentuated some other time. So the job of anyone who wants to change that sort of dynamic is, look, you need people who care, and you need people with ideas, and you need people who are making organizations and doing some of the legwork. But then you need to show a party that you can be useful, that you can help it do its job of winning elections and getting things done. And if you can do that, if you can show that, yes, there is a base here, there is a group of people who are eager about this, then at the very least, they need to pander to you. At the very least, they need to like make some concessions. And you saw this with the Democratic Party and Bernie Sanders, for example, that they started trying to make concessions and they started trying to woo him and everything. Any group can do that sort of thing. And so even when you have like a lot of young staffers, whatever, who are leaning one direction, a lot of people who are leaning one direction, there are always other people around and there are always other forces that can be channeled. You need to be aware of the dynamic. You need to be aware that like a lot of young educated professionals are progressives, and that will, shape the institutions that they're in and what that means. But as long as you handle it in a fairly straightforward way, as long as you go in with eyes wide open, all of that is manageable. Not like simply, oh, everything can be tied up neatly with a bow on top, but there are ways through.
Oh, no, I don't disagree. I guess my question though was more like how, right?
Right.
You mentioned that it's possible, we can do it. Okay, cool. I'm with you. How?
Yes.
What's the first step?
Yeah. So I think that one fantastic example is Grow SF in San Francisco, which has been doing extraordinarily well, credibly signaling governance from the center, credibly signaling this sort of competence focused governance, looking at things like the disastrous removing eighth grade algebra in San Francisco and stuff, and saying, we are going to get rid of the school board members who did that, and we are going to get people in there who will not do that sort of thing. And, they did that sort of thing successfully. They did a lot of just general effective governance focused initiatives successfully. I think another example, different, similar sphere but different method, is there's this organization, Maximum New York, that is focused on just teaching people the nuts and bolts of governance, teaching people like, this is how local politics works on a practical level. If you want to do things, you pull these levers, you do this stuff. And so they're working on just like teaching people this practical stuff, people who are like interested in going in, and focusing on just building sheer competence with that. And there are things like that. You can make specific issue focused groups. You can, but really a lot of it is built around sharing specific ideas in public, building followings around them, building groups around them, and getting clear momentum and clear initiative behind there is energy here. So, you have the structural elements, you have the like people in the background sitting and planning and thinking, how can we organize this? How can we organize this? Which systems or organizations do we have? And then you have the populist element, that actually getting people on the side of that. And both of those come in. Yeah.
Where has a more kind of center left failed at this? Because I think they obviously have. They have not. While you can mention a few groups that might be having local success, at least on a national level, no one's buying this. That the left has, moderates in it.
Right.
A lot of people will point to people even today who see the results of the Trump election and they say, well, it's because a lot of progressives stayed home because we didn't go progressive enough. We just needed to leftist harder, right? I've had people on my show say that, right? That we just didn't excite the leftist base, and so they didn't show up, and so we just need to go left even further than what we do. How would you reply to someone like that?
Right. I think the way to reply to someone like that is to point out, first of all, that they tried that several times, and the result was losing in primaries. And yes, they shouted, and yes, they were mad. And a lot of people are still mad about Bernie's 2016 and 2020 losses. But ultimately, I think that particularly in the 2020 primary, he had an honest shot against a wide field. He lost in the primaries. A lot of populist left candidates have lost electorally. And you see, particularly in this most recent election, candidates that could present a credible vision from the center, performing better electorally. So I think it's just like raw numbers on the ground. There was something that I saw that pointed out that like 6% of liberal or very liberal voters didn't vote. 24% of moderates didn't. 11% of conservatives didn't. And so you can look at numbers like that and get hints that no, there isn't really a socialist revolution waiting in America. But you asked also like why hasn't it happened? Why hasn't the center left been doing all these things? And I think part of it is because of the institutional crisis that we are facing and the way Republicans
define that for my audience real quick. You say institutional crisis. What do you mean?
Yes. So institutional crisis. One way to sum it up is that every institution in the country, basically every newspaper, every university, every respected, credible group with a long history, other than explicitly conservative ones, all united to say, this person, Donald Trump, is a tremendous danger to all of us and must be stopped. And they failed. Why did they fail at that? Because people have lost trust in the institutions. And there are some reasons that people have lost trust in the institutions that oh shoot, Lex Friedman.
Yeah. Thank you for the $100, Lex Friedman. Moderate independent thinking for the win. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Lex. He comes to my show every now and again. It's
fantastic.
Yeah. But go ahead.
But yes. So so you have some reasons where you can say, oh, people are just like wanting someone to pander to them, wanting whatever conspiracies, wanting whatever, stuck in this alternate news bubble, things like that. But you have part of it that is an accurate realization from lots of people that the institutions have, broadly speaking, accepted a set of progressive specific values that are not aligned with the values of the center of the country, that are not aligned with the values of the right of the country, that have their specific way of thinking and their specific frame on things, and they have certain blind spots and biases in it as a result. So as people have been saying, trust the institutions, trust the institutions, trust the institutions, a lot of center-left people, and I think one of the most high-profile examples would be Sam Harris, who has always been unambiguously center-left, would step out and would say, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this institution is wrong about this institution is wrong about this institution is wrong about this. But every time someone did that, they were basically not like cast out of the party. You still need their votes, you still like them, people still listen to them, whatever, but not really part of the broader institutional structure. They're like treated as a little bit suspicious, treated as not progressive enough, treated as someone to be a little bit sketched out by someone who might be going down the alt-right pipeline or something. And so you had a lot of these institutional critics who have been in this center-left place saying we should probably do something more than just trust the institutions. Well, the left has been saying, well, no, institutions, trust the institutions, it's what we do, the institutions are fine. Well, young progressives have been saying, and we want these institutions to be very progressive, and we will be pushing this progressive thing and this progressive thing and this progressive thing. So there's been this tension in there that the Republican Party responded to by creating more captured and worse institutions on their side and doing it effectively enough to, galvanize them and realize.
Why do the voters seem to trust those institutions, the conservative institutions that you mentioned, while they don't trust the others? Like, what, I guess to be more clear, why don't people trust the institutions anymore? Because obviously I think it's true just overall that they don't. You can look at poll after poll after poll, from institutions that are trusted less now today than they were 20 years ago. We could look at the military, we could look at science, we could look at academia, we can look at, like, it runs a gamut. So why though? What happened? What caused this distrust?
Yeah, I think one very specific and useful example here is looking at what happened around the time that Joe Biden dropped out of the race and what happened in the lead up to the time that Joe Biden dropped out of the presidential race. You had a few people like Ezra Klein and Nate Silver who were saying, hey, Biden's super old. He's not all there. He should think about dropping out. And you had everyone in this broader institutional blob, in this collective, screaming at them and saying, how dare you say this? How dare you think this? How dare you do this? Stop it, stop it, stop it. No, no, no. And then Biden went up on the debate stage and was obviously so completely incapable of standing there and doing anything, that it completely torpedoed his campaign and they had to root everything up and start again
Well,
from ground zero. That's the sort of thing that destroys
well,
trust.
the problem with that, we have a little bit of a disagreement, but I'll talk. $10 more from Lex Friedman to say, do you think Sam Harris is still center left? Who are good examples of center left, do you think? And I'll ask you this question: if you had to list your top 3 center lefters that are currently moderate left, who would you name?
Yeah. So the ones that I respect, they're not super attached to politics, qua politics, but they have that's where they are. So Scott Alexander of the blog Astral Codex 10, I think, is the premier thinker of the sort of loose coalition of quote unquote heterodox center left. He's brilliant in a lot of ways on a lot of topics, and I think anyone in the sphere that I really respect, almost all of them will have read and appreciated Scott Alexander's work. So he's one. I do think Sam Harris is still center left. I think that he has always been extremely anti-Trump, has been extremely progressive skeptical, while still wanting Democrats to win. I think my former bosses, Jesse Singal, Katie Herzog, I think they're good examples of center left. Again, this sort of skepticism. And then you have the more institutional center left sorts, but I honestly don't find the more institutional ones that interesting, because I think that the institutional crisis does exist and does need to be grappled with.
To get back to the Biden thing, so I agree with you, right? That Biden shouldn't have run for another term. It was clear that he was too old. But the way I see it, and I think many people, at least in Pennsylvania where I live, see it this way too. Again, not everyone, obviously. The people who pushed him out were the institutions. It was the machine that did it. Like, I voted for Biden in the primary. They threw my vote out, and it was galling to me to watch, to have Cenk Uygur on my show, right, saying, "Oh, I don't care how you voted. I want him out, so we're gonna get him out." And that felt, it deeply disturbed me how the whole thing was handled.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's completely fair. I also happen to be in Pennsylvania, which is another funny commonality we have.
What are
right
you
now.
doing? Are you like my doppelganger? Oh, hold on. I'm 41. How old are you?
Oh, I'm only 29.
Oh,
So
thank God.
we got that
Like,
separation.
okay, so maybe I'm older than you. You from the future, but go ahead.
Something like that. But yeah, so but I think that's a good example. So what I'll say is there was this sort of circling the wagons around Joe Biden until they were like, okay, we can't actually do what we need to do with him, therefore he is out. And now we are going to put Kamala Harris in and just say, yeah, everyone go with Kamala. Everyone, you'll be excited about Kamala, right? You can circle around Kamala. So I think both of, there's a synthesis between our things here where you were like, no, I voted for Biden. Like, what's going on here? And I was looking and saying, well, look, obviously, like, something is wrong, and they won't say it until like the signal hits. But basically, you see people unite around false or convenient narratives until they can no longer unite around them. You also have specific instances of institutional collapse that just don't really get a hearing in a lot of mainstream outlets a lot of the times, and you have to turn to quote unquote heterodox spaces or right wing spaces for them. For example, a story that I broke on Twitter was about this lawsuit in the FAA over an air traffic control hiring test that was facially absurd. Like, this test, right? It people went from having this merit-based test, this simple can you do the job type of test, to a biographical questionnaire that asked questions like, what was your lowest grade in high school? Correct answer, science. What was your lowest grade in high school or in college? Correct answer, history. Are you a risk taker? Correct answer, very much a risk taker. Just completely arbitrary. I need to emphasize, wildly arbitrary things.
Yeah, these don't even make sense as questions. Why are they asking? What?
They knocked out 90% of candidates with this bizarre questionnaire. It was a huge scandal back in 2014 to 2016. There is still a lawsuit ongoing over it. It took ages to sort that mess out, and then no one talked about it, no one addressed it, no one was candid about it, and it just sort of sat there lingering, and the lawsuit is still going on from it. And so there are examples like that people can point to and say, look, this institution failed in this way, and the institutions are not addressing it. The institutions are sidestepping it. The institutions are being dishonest about the causes of it. The institutions are just not working. I think there's also a general, Ezra Klein was pointing out that in 1900s, in the early 1900s, you announced the subway, and 4 years later, there was this massive subway. during Barack Obama's term, they announced a major public works program, and very, very little has come from that in a practical sense. And so when the institutions stop building things effectively, when the institutions stop telling truth effectively, when the institutions become captured by specific niche, activist topics, people notice all of those things. And when they're told to trust the institutions without those things being addressed and without those things being stared down candidly, people struggle with that.
One of the things that when I was in the military that kind of galled me, that I saw over and over and over again, um, the less you did, the less risk you had of being called to the carpet, of being punished. You could succeed in the military by doing as little as possible. It's the people who went and volunteered and then messed up or got it wrong that faced severe repercussions. So I wonder how much of that is at play when it comes to the politicians and the institutions. They are so afraid of making a mistake or doing something wrong and being punished by the public that they have decided to do nothing. This is just an intuition I have. I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts there? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. Part of it is that being afraid to do anything. Part of it is the convenience of blame shifting. But that doesn't really answer why things have shifted from the past to the
Yeah,
present
sure,
as much.
sure.
Um, Another part of it is that as the opinions of young, educated professionals have diverged from the opinions of the country at large, and as this, professional class has generated a set of norms and a set of ideas and a set of values that is distinctive from, older or more widely shared values, then the specific people that these institutions are thinking of responding to are these young educated professionals and are the norms and the values of those people. And so, specifically, as they enter tripwires from that group, and as they enter specific norms from that group, and as they enter things that everyone knows you don't really say from that group, then there becomes a lot of incentive to avoid being the one to touch the third rail and to avoid being the one to say something that is deeply controversial among that group, even if it might not be controversial at all among the general public. And as another part of it is sort of division of labor. So people can have like moderate views on a bunch of things, but activist views on one thing. And if you are trusting a broad distributed group to do your thinking for you, the person who feels the strongest about something is the one you're going to cede to on a lot of things with that. So in education, for example, most people can say, gifted classes are good. We like gifted classes. We like advanced education. We like selective high schools, whatever. And the people who specifically go into education policy are saying like, we want to get rid of a lot of these in the name of equity. And this is really important to us. And so then you have things like the detracking movement sweeping in. You have these equity-focused movements that most people, if you put it to a vote, and sometimes it has been directly put to a vote, would say, actually, we want students to have eighth grade algebra. We want these things, but the people who care most about it and who are most organized on it, those are the ones who have the driving force with it.
No, that makes a lot of sense, right? If you have 90% of people don't have really strong feelings on spaghetti, right? But they prefer it with meatballs, but their feelings aren't very strong. But then you have 10% of the population who hates meatballs on spaghetti and are willing to blow up a hospital if they put meatballs on spaghetti. You tend to kind of go with the guys who are loudest in the room. So I get what you're saying there. I I don't know. Like, I know you're hopeful about the Democratic Party. What about the Republicans? I hear more and more and more from people who were on the right, who are no longer on the right, or who just don't vote anymore because of what's happening to the Republican Party. Is there any hope for the Republicans when it comes to kind of getting out of their extremism? We've talked a little bit about the left. Let's talk about the right, right?
Sure.
What's going on over there in the right land?
So I do think that people who are like the old school, sort of respectable style conservatives are a dying breed and are going to continue to be a dying breed. And the reason is that the parties have
So is
realigned
Trump
such
the
that
future? Like, I'll just
sort
ask
of
you straight out. Is Trump the
post
future?
uh, the future is more like Trump than it is like the old Republican Party. And the reason
Okay.
is that the parties have realigned to being the anti institutionalist party and the institutionalist party. And Republicans are full on as the anti institutionalist party right now. You see RFK go in, you see Gabbard go in, you see Elon go in, you see all these people who are not by any means traditional Republicans, but who really hate the institutions. And they are welcomed because they really hate the institutions. They really hate this thing, and it coalesces around being this anti-institutional party. And Trump managed to give a sort of energy for that, this guiding. This guy has a credible signal of smashing all of it. He is extreme in many ways, but he is not extreme in the way that Republicans were traditionally extreme, in the sense of he is not, say, an extreme social conservative. He does not have like a super hardline stance on abortion. He does not have a super hardline stance on gay marriage. He's not like radically free market, quite the opposite. He likes tariffs, things like that. Um, he's extreme in, being willing to deny an election. He's extreme in his rhetoric. He's extreme in his views on immigration, whatever. But these are a different style of extremism. So, what is the future of the Republican Party? There's a sort of grimmer future and a darker future. The grimmer future is that it becomes dominated by what Richard Hanania called the Dale Gribble voter, which he referred to as just like really conspiratorial, low trust voters who just want to like burn the whole system down. Is the quick gloss on it. And they could just elect kooks who don't care at all about truth and go whatever. There is that direction. There is the questionable return direction where they just say, okay, we're done with this experiment. We're back to the evangelicals. We're back to social conservatives. We're back to that. I don't really see that happening. I don't think they have the base for it. Or the most likely direction is the sort of Vance post-Trump direction where you have the tech right coming in, the Silicon Valley types who are like often formally on the left and now sort of seeing this opportunity to build a counter elite outside the institutions and to like take over conservative institutions now that there's sort of a dearth of conservative talent. You see people looking outside the institutions and being willing to like try weirder things and burn more things down. So, what is the future of the Republican Party? Anti-institutionalist in one way or another, and whether the extent to which it will be sane, the extent to which it will be responsible, depends heavily on like which direction it chooses.
Well, we see some of the Trump appointments, right?
Yes.
Do you have any favorites so far? Any ones you like more than others? Any ones you are like desperately afraid of? What are your thoughts on the appointments so far?
RFK is the worst by far. If I
Really?
could get rid of one of them,
Worse
I
than
would get rid of
Gabbard? Worse
RFK.
than Gates was?
Yeah, look, so his whole thing, this is, I don't like Gates at all. I don't like Hegseth at all. I don't particularly like Gabbard. What I find so deeply and uniquely offensive about RFK is his relationship with truth, um, and his position in regards to his
Can you
relationship
explain
with
that,
truth.
right? Because
Yeah,
looking from the outside, right? Like if a lot of people that I know that only just barely follow politics, right? They just watch the news on occasion, or they'll look to see what people are talking about online. They'll see RFK, and they'll be like, "Yeah, he just wants us to eat healthier, right? He just
right.
wants to regulate the FDA in a different way. What's wrong with that?"
Yeah, so I think that you look at his specific history and you look at his specific focus, and he has been deeply passionate about. He'll say, "I'm not anti-vaccine. I just want this, this question answered, this question answered." But he has jumped on every anti-vaccination conspiracy theory in history, and jumped on many more, like just really disconnected from truth things. So one specific example that Richard Hanania gave about him recently is that there is a book that uh, his um, his organization, his anti-vaccine organization, co-published that, for example, had a lot of pictures on the cover of like death cause unknown. And the people in these cause unknown deaths, they didn't actually die of anything related to COVID vaccines. A lot of them very definitely did not, had clearly established other causes of death at some point, didn't know they were on this cover, didn't have anything to do with this. RFK like writes the foreword to this book, calling it this bold, truth-telling book. And you look inside, and the book's standards cover insides just do not reflect truth. do not like reflect a respect for truth. They reflect the spirit of just throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, of throwing every argument at the institutions and seeing what sticks. And my experience is that on many topics, RFK will just display this sort of you can trust me because I am fighting against these, institutions that we all hate, whatever. But the way he is fighting against them is by just lying or convincing himself of untruths about them and convincing other people of untruths about them. And I think if a movement is not founded in accurate information and an accurate understanding of the world, then it's going to lead to a lot of disaster. So that's why
No, that's a fair answer. My read on RFK, at least, say what you want, I think he actually believes what he says. I don't think what he says is correct, right? But the read I get from him is he's an honest broker in that sense. And I do wonder, right, to kind of tie this back into the kind of Kamala Trump thing, is one of the reasons that people didn't go for Kamala is because they didn't see her as an honest actor. Like, they don't care pretty much what you're saying as long as they see you as genuine. I wonder how much truth there is to that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. And I feel that. Like, I have the same thing. Like, for such a long time, Democrats as a party have been trying to put through extraordinarily focus grouped politicians with extraordinarily focus grouped positions.
They seem manufactured. Yes, they came out of the assembly line, like put together. Like this is why, like, Pete Buttigieg, great speaker, nice guy, I'm sure, but he just comes across as like so, I don't know, manufactured to me. I don't know.
Yeah, and I like Pete actually a lot. He seems like competent, smart, capable. But yes, he is very much playing this machine mold. And Obama sort of set the era of sort of appealing to all people with these fuzzy good feelings, triangulating in the primaries, and then getting down to business in the actual governance, where that they will say what voters want to hear, and then what they will govern, how the Democratic Party wants to govern, and they will represent the Democratic Party well, and everyone goes home happy. And for a long time, that worked well enough because voters were happy enough. But I do think that voters are just getting really, really sick of this inauthentic focus grouped approach where, people, and this gets to the whole people saying Kamala Harris ran to the center. Nobody in the world looked at Kamala and thought, yes, her deepest convictions are that the center is correct on things and that everyone else is wrong about things. She is deeply convinced that, say, these.
But she ran on the right on immigration. She was pro anti-immigrant or anti-immigration. She was, and they'll like she yeah, the immigration is the one they use most of the time, right?
Right. And people will say that, and they're right, that technically during the campaign, she took this anti-immigration stance, and nobody in the world believed that stance or should have believed that stance as like a sincere reflection of the deepest truth she actually believed. They understood this is what the electorate wants to hear. This is what polls well. So yes, I think that the first thing that Democrats really need to do is accept that you need someone who has convictions and is willing to show those convictions. That the sort of thing that I would hope to see from the center is a politician who really actually believes things somewhat similar to what I believe. I'm not picky. I don't need everything, but someone who understands where I'm coming
from. What's your top one? What's your top one? A politician comes on to the national stage and says, I have a policy I'm putting forward, and it's this. What is that one thing that gets you to sit up, take notice, and say, I'm with you, sir or madam, I'm ready, right?
Yeah, I would say that the top thing a politician could do is come out and say, we had this bipartisan consensus on education that culminated in No Child Left Behind, and that consensus was wrong, it was bad, it was stupid. And the reasons that consensus was wrong, it was bad, and it was stupid are that it treated all students as if they should progress at the same rate. And so it punished schools and students, it punished the teachers who were teaching the students who were most in need, while it neglected the students who were progressing at a rate faster than other students. And the task in education should be to meet students where they are at and to lift them to where they can be, not to imagine that they will all go to the same level. And if someone came out and said that about education, and they specifically said, things like talking about no, I think that tests are valuable, tests are important, selective schools are valuable for these reasons, gifted classes have this role, these things have this role, all of these things have these different roles to teach groups of students what they need. That's the sort of thing that, it's a niche issue, but it's my niche issue. And that's the sort of thing that
Well,
would
that's
really
what
get
I
my
asked. I
point.
asked for your niche issue, not like what you
Yeah,
think the average centrist wants, right? Like when we
right.
look at the exit polls and we'll look at polling, like the top two on everyone's mind, at least this election season, were the economy and immigration. Um, I can't I can't tell you for the life of me though, like what Kamala's economic policy was. I can say that she had like a child tax credit she mentioned a few times for like $6,000 or something. I can also mention that she wanted like a $50,000 loan for new businesses and a $25,000 tax credit for new homes. And I might have mixed those up, right? But like I just can't think of what the Democratic economic policy was this time around. Like I could tell you Trump's, it's tariffs, deport the illegals, right? But I can't tell you Kamala's. I just don't know.
Yeah, I would say that Kamala's economic policy, like many of her policies, was warmed over dregs of leftism or progressivism, softened down to what they think that people will accept. So things like, price controls or whatever, I don't think that actually would have happened, but it would have been there. Sort of Warren-esque economics, very pro-union economics, very much like in, say, any fight like the dock workers union against others, they side with the dock workers union. Somewhat protectionist, just because that protectionism is sort of the direction the country's headed right now for whatever reasons. Very much, redistribution, things like that. But yeah, just like blah Democratic Party policy that she, uh, you know, she would talk about it, but economics has never been. I don't really know what her focus ever was, but economics certainly wasn't her particular focus. It was just
Okay.
like, we'll figure it out. The
That would
Democratic
have been my
Party,
next
trust the
question.
Democratic
What was
Party.
the focus? But if you don't know, then fair enough. I
No,
don't think
well,
it.
her two focuses were abortion and democracy. Um, that she was like, we are the party that protects abortion rights, and we are the party that protects democracy. And those were the two things that she hit on again and again. And the Democratic Party was sort of counting on those two being enough to sway people. And yeah, it didn't work.
No, it didn't work. What will next cycle coming around? 26. The midterms coming up. What should Democratic politicians focus on? What should their focus be coming up in order to kind of win back America?
Yeah, I think that their most immediate focus is to show that they can govern in the blue cities, to show that they can really address the concerns of people on the ground.
Govern in the
Bring,
blue cities. Can you define that? What does show they can govern in the blue cities?
yeah,
Elaborate, please.
Um, for example, I think the YIMBY movement is dead on that a lot of housing needs to be built and it needs to be built yesterday. That prices in a lot of these cities in terms of housing are just ridiculous. That San Francisco, New York, people are leaving blue states and going to red states because they cannot afford to live there. And so one of the highest priorities is to show that you can seriously address these costs. You can use, competence, technocratic, whatever policy to address these, or crime in the cities, crime and disorder, things like that. So that, people are concerned about tents on the streets, people are concerned about whatever signs of disorder, dysfunction. Show that you can not, you know, go in a, oh, we are going to be cruel, blah, 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 blah. We're going to be like masculine, whatever, show how mean we can be to people, so much as just like, no, we understand the sort of city that people want to live in, and we are willing to work to make that happen. I think being willing to push back against progressive groups and things like that is going to be really important. So, for
Which
example,
ones? Yeah.
all of them, you need to be willing to push back against all of them. Like,
But there's
politicians should
no
go with their
progressive group that you
convictions.
would say that it's okay to kind of get behind. Like that's a like we that would be a hard sell
Sure.
in the Democratic primary to say
So,
all the
so
progressives are bad, right?
so what I'll say is there's this term that I like, the omnicause, and I think the omnicause reached its apex with the Palestine movement. After everyone hops on whatever new and flashy thing is the current activism topic of the day, and everyone expects everyone to be on board with all of it. You're on board with defund the police. You're on board with Black Lives Matter. You're on board with trans liberation now. You're on board with climate change. You're on board with free Palestine. And if you're not on board with any of these things, then you are an object of suspicion. You are a threat. You are someone to be treated with some disrespect. And this isn't specifically Democratic Party. This is a lot of leftists as well pushing this and pushing Democrats further left with it. And it's a conscious strategy from, a lot of people on the further left to try and pull the Democrats to the left with that. And, I have sympathies with elements of some of those movements. I do. And I think everyone in the Democratic Party has sympathies with the elements of some of those movements.
Mm-hmm.
But what you need to be able to do is you need to be able to credibly show that there is intra-party debate on some of these things and that people are able to actively push back on that and actively stake out something else while still having a place in the coalition. The Republican Party is so incoherent right now in all the people that it accepts into it, and Democrats have been purifying and purifying and purifying until they realized that they purified down so small that they couldn't actually win with that purified coalition. So they need to be willing to push back on all of it.
I was looking for something like I voted for Harris. Full disclosure, right? I
Right.
worked with Progressive Victory to try to help her win, right? I was basically voting against Trump. I did not like Trump. I do not like Trump. I think he's going to be bad for this country, for a whole host of reasons. But one of the things I was wanting her to do, I was asking, like, for her to do, was to tell the extremists no, just on one thing. Just pick a topic, right? Maybe ACAB, maybe Israel Palestine, maybe I don't know, education. Just find an extremist that you disagree with in your party and say no. Just publicly say no. No, I really don't think we should provide transgender health care for inmates in prison that are illegal immigrants, right? Just one thing. I can't think of a time where she told anyone no. Can you?
Yeah. No, I think that you're right on that. Like what she would do is she would have aides quietly walk back one of her old positions and say, I don't actually think this exactly, or quietly, like, she would try to find ways to triangulate and ways to angle between things. But no, she didn't ever have. And I was looking for the same thing. I was waiting for the same thing, this firm repudiation moment. And I recognize that I'm to the right of most people in the Democratic Party.
You are.
I recognize that. But, you know, I just wanted to be thrown a bone. And yeah, absolutely. Like, one way to do that is by really emphatically, vigorously saying, well, no,
A
on this
Sister Soldier
left
moment,
position,
right? Like Clinton had. Yeah.
a really passionate one, like a really, like, they mean it, say it with the gut one, where it's
Yeah.
not just like, oh, I'm triangulating here or there,
Call
but
him
like,
a
no,
slur.
I'm
Go
seriously.
ahead, right? Like, just get him on stage and call him a slur. No. I mean, she would have gotten more votes, I think, but I don't know if that's the way to go.
No, I don't think that is the way to go. But yeah, and yeah, just like have become the party of institutions, so show that you can actually address the problems of those institutions instead of just like playing nice and keeping everyone together and saying, trust us, we're the nice party, we're the institutional party, we're competent, don't scratch too deep beneath the surface for flaws, don't and definitely don't rock the boat. Like, you need willingness to rock the boat a little bit more, and willingness to yeah show a little bit more conviction and a little bit more willingness to deviate from one specific, very firm line on things.
No, I feel you. I guess I do want to get at callers eventually, but I have a couple more questions, right? You mentioned a lot in your discussions, like on Twitter and other places I've heard you talk about the machine. What's the machine?
Yes. So the machine is my term for the set of knowledge generating and powerful institutions that educated professionals rely on. So academia, legacy media institutions. I would say Democratic Party governance structures are part of it. The civil service is part of it. The legal system, K-12 schools, all of that, where the machine is this combined set of accepted wisdom and trusted institutions among these professionals, where you can say, say like the CDC said this, that's part of the machine. Or you can say this study from Harvard said this, that's part of the machine. And it is what one could sort of describe as a giant collective brain of the group of people who trust that. And it is made up of all of most of the institutions that keep a lot of things running and keep a lot of like knowledge focused things
Well,
going.
like a lot of that sounds like a good thing though, but in your writing,
Yes.
it doesn't seem like a good thing. Like you are almost always, at least as I've seen, speaking negatively about it, right? Speaking
Yeah.
negatively about the machine and its foibles and its faults. But like from your description there, they keep the lights on. That seems like an eminently good thing, right? Like they make things work. And isn't that what you wanted at the beginning when we had this discussion?
Right. And that's the, I would say, perhaps the central paradox in my politics right now is that I am an institutionalist at heart. I love institutions. I love the role of institutions. I think institutions are vital. I think institutions are important. I think institutions are useful. I also think that institutions right now are systematically broken in some specific areas and some specific ways that make them systematically untrustworthy and systematically misinforming people along several dimensions that make it so that a lot of people, outside this system, can't find niches to, whether credibly or because they're just venting people's frustrations, act as competitors to it. And I think that uh, I I dislike and distrust it, or my writing reflects a lot of dislike and distrust for it. And I'm in law school right now. I like law school. I appreciate it. I think there's a lot of good stuff there. I would happily like write for these papers. I read them. I rely on a lot of things of it, but I recognize serious overarching flaws in it
Mm.
that it has not honestly grappled with of itself, and that the Democratic Party has not honestly grappled with it. And I feel like people who every right now, the instinct of institutions is to defend themselves. A lot of institutional critics, I think, have been unreasonably lumped into positions of people you shouldn't listen to and people you shouldn't trust.
Well, what would you
By people.
give me an example between the two? Like, so, someone who is someone who has been unfairly labeled. I think you mentioned Sam Harris, right? But can you give us
Yeah,
another example of someone who's been unfairly demonized by the institutional machine, right? That should not have been.
sure. I think that this one will be somewhat controversial, but all of them will be somewhat controversial. I think the magazine Quillette is a good example of it, where
Okay.
if you read
Yeah.
a lot of what it said, it has a lot of really accurate and effective critiques of the American right. It has its founders have taken principled stances on a lot of things. It has a few positions that basically everyone in this set of educated professionals disagree with and are wary of, but basically everything coming out of it is treated as tainted by this by this collective group, and even as say like a Harvard professor writes for it or someone else writes for it, people will look at its output and say, "Oh, this output is bad because of this." And I think it's easy in a lot of cases to point to people outside the institutions and say, "Oh, they're making this error, they're making this error, they're making this error." But what the institutions will do a lot of times is they'll point to one or two things, and that will be sufficient to dismiss something like that. They rule people out by errors. They don't rule people in by accurate things, or notice when people are getting things right that a lot of other institutions are not getting right, or focusing on useful things that those institutions aren't focusing on. So yeah, cool. That's an example.
Yeah, can you give me an example of the opposite? Someone who has been fairly demonized, that should have been, that the institutions
Brett Weinstein.
protected us from, right?
Brett Weinstein and RFK. I think that
Fair enough.
they, yeah, they act as sort of gurus who want people to trust them and to tell everyone that everyone else is wrong and yada yada yada, and they abuse that trust. I think that Brett Weinstein is the quintessential example of that.
Really? Elaborate for people who may not be familiar with Brett Weinstein. Why is he the quintessential example of a false guru?
Yeah, so I'll give one example. I'm trying to think. Okay,
My chat was liking you until then, by the way. They were like, "Oh, yeah. Well, at least my YouTube
I
chat,
know,
my
right?
Twitch chat is asking me if I'm being paid by the right to spread division." So you know. But anyway, go ahead.
Excellent. So shoot, what was the specific moment? There was this time where, um, during the 2020 campaign, Brett Weinstein was, or 2024 campaign, excuse me, uh, he was pointing to something. I'm trying to remember the specific thing where saying this is a false flag, or this might be a false flag, but there are legitimate questions about this that the um, the see, see I don't want to I don't want to say something that
You
I
don't want
can't
to misquote
specifically
him,
back
right?
up.
I get you. I get
Exactly,
you. Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
But I think
Um,
when we're saying like this person's a false guru, okay, example, please, right?
yeah, no. It's completely fair to ask me for an example, and I should have one prepared for it. But my uh my
It's all
case with
good. It's
him,
only live. It's only being
yeah,
watched by like 100 people right now. It's all good, right? Take your time. It's all good.
yeah. Okay, so here's an
Okay, here we go.
example. So Brett Weinstein tweets: The Prime Minister of Slovakia, Robert Fico, had been shot. This comes days after Slovakia's courageous rejection of the WHO's audacious pandemic preparedness treaty and international health regulations. We can't be certain if these events are connected, but whoever is steering the WHO clearly views national sovereignty as an irritant and human lives as disposable. So he doesn't come out and outright say, oh, yeah, the Prime Minister of Slovakia was shot by the World Health Organization or someone affiliated with them for defying them. But he really furtively wiggles his brow and hints at those things. And I don't want people to issue checks they can't cash. I don't want people to spread rumors and spread ideas that they can't clearly back up and can't cleanly back up and can't cleanly defend. And I think he does that a lot. And he takes this very scattershot approach where he is, he is careless with the truth a lot of times.
Fair enough. $7 from Statutory Ape to ask, when will pro-immigration become the racist position because you're exploiting other countries for their talent? Thank you for the $7. Um,
Yeah.
$10 from Grassroots Hegemon. This is your spreading division check. You'll get the rest when the beard returns safely and unharmed. Look, they paid me to shave my beard. I did. Okay. If nothing, if not responsive to large sums of cash. So I'm going to ask you one more question, but while I do, I think since we're at the hour mark, now's a good time. Gang, if you have questions for our dear guest here, Trace, and you want to talk to him, you're more than welcome. All you have to do is you have to join the Discord. You have to click the rules, accept the rules, so you don't say slurs or nothing. And then you go to backstage, and I'll pull you in, and you can talk to him for a moment or two and ask him a couple questions if you'd like. You could also pay me money, and I will read what you say for money. That will work too. But while we let people kind of gather if they're interested, you mentioned that, maybe maybe I'm misremembering this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you recently registered as a Democrat.
I did, yeah.
Why?
Buy low, sell high. I think
Okay.
that
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
I somewhat between the Democrat and the Republican parties as traditionally conceived, but I've always been adamantly, unambiguously anti-Trump. And my whole family actually. My dad left the Republican Party when
Why?
Trump became. Yeah. Why am I adamantly anti-Trump? I think that he is corrupt. I think that he is dishonest. I think that his character is fundamentally unfit for the presidency. I think he is just someone who creates very high variance situations where he is willing to do irresponsible and off the wall things, say irresponsible and off the wall things, to basically uh, he doesn't care. He says things without caring whether they're true or not, so long as they are useful to him, so long as they have the right vibes. He is I think that a lot of his, offensive comments are legitimately offensive, and I think that's wrong. I just think that he is fundamentally an incredibly unworthy person to be president and worse than the machine that he is fighting against in many
Worse
ways.
than
So
the machine that he's fighting against. I'm being asked by the chat for please ask if there is one thing he believes the government or institution lie about.
yeah, I think really anything related to social justice issues, the institutions are going to be unreliable in a way that favors the social justice issues. So,
Can you give a specific example
yeah.
for the class, right?
So this is going back to my FAA hiring scandal the example that the core reason for that was that there was and this is all documented really well in the lawsuit, and people can read my article for the details on it. But the core um, driving cause of that lawsuit or that hiring scandal was an interest group in the FAA saying, why aren't we hiring more black employees? Why aren't we hiring more black people with that? And so they pulled this commission together, and they were like, okay, this test is a barrier, therefore we're going to replace it with this biographical questionnaire. And this interest group, one guy in the group, started giving answers on this biographical questionnaire out to people in the interest group or affiliated with the interest group, things like that. And all of that is as well documented as something like this can be. It happened. It is in the public record, but it's not the sort of thing that anyone really wants to examine or address head on or focus on too much, because it gets to questions about race, and it gets to uncomfortable topics with that, and so people just sort of set it aside and move on to the next thing. That's one example.
What is one thing? I guess the opposite. We have some people in line. Gang, if you want in, if you want to talk to this guy, and I hope you do. Right, a lot of you are being noisy in chat. Right, come talk to him if you disagree. He's not gonna bite you. Right. Yeah, jump backstage. But I guess kind of like a inverse question to that. What do you think the government's getting right that a lot of the the anti-institutionalists are like, the government lies about this? But one thing, what are they saying that is actually kind of accurate?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Operation Warp Speed was Trump's greatest success in office, and now he can't own it, and all the Republicans don't really want to give him credit for it, and all the anti-institutionalists don't want to give him credit for it. I would say the institutions were broadly uh, wrong about lockdowns after the vaccine. They were 100% right about the COVID vaccine, more or less. And yeah, I think a lot of the noise around it has been just that noise.
Fair enough. Okay. Let's bring on some guests and see what they have to say. I'm trying to go in the order you guys appeared. If I mess up, I apologize. Hi, you're live.
Hi. Give me 1 second to mute you and the other thing. There we go. All right. So question. Well, first of all, so the left and the right come from like the French Revolution, the left being for new ideas, right for the old. Since you're saying that that the left and right are swapping on, or the Democrats and Republicans are swapping on institutionalism and anti-institutionalism, would you say that they would be also technically swapping from being left and right?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's a really insightful question. And I think, by the way, I like your avatar, big fan. But I think that they are struggling with their roles in the sense of you have this new movement, the dissident right, right? And dissident and right in this old French Revolution frame shouldn't really go together, because the right should be the institutionalists, should be the ones conserving things and preserving things and everything. And these distant right guys are trying to be the edgy rebels who are pushing right wing ideas. And so there's this inherent tension in the dissident right where they like value, ostensibly, they value the idea of good institutions, they value the idea of hierarchy, value the idea of excellence. And they're saying, oh, yeah, all of our institutions are completely rotten and they need to be torn down. And these very per this French Revolution style, fundamentally left ideas. And progressives, meanwhile, think of themselves as the underdogs, think of themselves as the rebels, think of themselves as whatever. even as you go to a history museum and their narrative is what you read in a history museum. You sit in a classroom and much of their narrative is what you hear in a classroom. You go to university and their narrative is what you hear in university. Even as they win in a lot of areas, they think of themselves fundamentally as this underdog narrative and can't really grapple with themselves as a center of power. And so they are uneasy with their position as powerful because they want to be voices for the powerless. And the right wingers are uneasy with their positions as the rebellion because they want to be these powerful institutions. And I think that is the cause of a lot of the peculiarity in the current day.
I think
Does that answer?
that does answer my question, but I'm gonna just put this little thing before I get kicked out. I do think part of it does have to do with because Trump was a lefty, at least during the 80s and 90s, because he was a Democrat, and then now him jumping over to the Republican. I think he's just causing the color switch because he technically is kind of still that old version, but he's an 80s and 90s
Is he a
version.
cause or is he a symptom?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I think that's the correct answer. I think that he is both a cause and a symptom of it. No, I think that's legitimate.
Okay.
I'll get out of your hair. You kick me out, okay?
No,
Thanks,
thank you for calling in, buddy. Always a pleasure. And send him to the void, right? Once he stops being on the program, he ceases to exist, like everyone. Let's bring in the next caller. But no, before we bring in the next caller, yeah, I do see kind of like a realignment happening, at least amongst like the people I talk to, of people who have been lifelong Democrats. I saw this with my uncle back in 2016, 2014-esque era, right? Lifelong Democrat. And suddenly he's given me really right-wing talking points because he felt abandoned. He felt like he was no longer represented and that he was being lied to. And so, yeah, I see that happening. It's a shift. I don't know if we're exactly reversing, but there is a realignment going on.
Yeah.
Hello, you're live.
Yeah, I guess this goes towards both you guys then. I don't understand where you guys seem to think you're throwing out the same propaganda that Trump throws out at our party as a winning strategy. Because that's what I've
Can
heard
you
from both you
elaborate? What do you
guys.
mean the same propaganda that Trump throws out?
Oh, you're attacking the party on their values. The far left, the LGBTQ. You think that they are the problem, which is what Trump says too. So if you're throwing out the same kind of, oh, let's blame the far left, that Trump's paying money to put out there, then yeah, I do have to ask, are you actually getting money from Trump because he's spending money to get your opinions that you're throwing out there out there? So
Are you being paid by the Trump campaign, sir?
I do actually, in a roundabout way, one could argue I am now that Twitter has payments, because I post on Twitter and some of Elon's money flows into my pocket that way. So one could argue that. But on a serious note, I would say that I don't really choose my positions and my statements based on, does this help the Democratic Party? Does this help Republicans? Does this hurt this? Does this hurt what? I stand where I stand. I've been anti-Trump his whole time. I've also seen a lot of forces on the left come up that I've been frustrated with, and I'm going to speak against both of those and speak candidly against both of those for my reasons, with frustration with both of those. And look, I'm gay. I'm married very happily to my husband, and I appreciate that sort of thing. I respect trans people. I would say I have some quibbles with the activist wing of it, but I am not fundamentally opposed to a lot of these things. I do, however, travel in a very different social milieu to progressives. I have different goals. I don't apologize for having different goals than them. I know where I stand and why I stand there. But if I say something that sounds like quote unquote right wing propaganda, it's because I believe it. And I think that the Democratic Party would be more effective in representing my values if it took some of the I don't think many of my criticisms actually come that close to what the actual Trump campaign is focusing on. But I would say that I think my criticisms are right. I like where I stand on things, and I think other people should stand there.
What just out of curiosity, I'll let you respond. But out of curiosity, I like to ask people this question: what are you most worried that you're wrong about? Like, what belief that you have that you're most kind of like, oh man, I might actually have gotten this one wrong? Is there anything where you're like, kind of like, oh man, like you're only 60-40 instead of like 80-20 on?
Immigration, I think.
Okay.
I, I am really inclined to be super pro immigration. Personally, my instincts are deeply, deeply pro immigration, and I recognize that I'm out of line with a majority of Americans on that right now, and I am trying to. Yeah, I think that there are ways that I could more deeply examine that issue and more deeply figure out where I need to land on it. But yeah, I think immigration.
Well, I think we needed to do something different than we did. I know Kamala Harris's plans for the border were different than Trump's, but she really wasn't very outspoken about what the difference was. She just made it seem like, yes, there's a big problem there, and we got it solved, and bipartisanship. And again, I keep hearing like it's this far left that cost us the election, but like bipartisan border bills. We got Cheney's running around. We have her dodging questions about the LGBTQ. Um, just time and
Yeah,
time again, where she just wasn't very progressive in this campaign, where
Mm.
she takes she had before, she just kind of just didn't want to say now this year.
yeah, no, that's completely fair. That's completely important. And I'm really glad you raised those things because it touches on a critical point that I would say the left, from my perspective, misunderstands about the center. When they see Kamala Harris as a centrist candidate and they see her running away from these things and they see her, talking about the border stuff, talking with Liz Cheney, things like that I don't actually care about Liz Cheney. Like seeing that Liz Cheney is endorsing Kamala Harris because they both support democracy and become a campaign surrogate because they both support democracy and everything. Like that doesn't actually do anything for me. Seeing Kamala Harris be a weather vane and back away from things that she was really passionate about, or like be a weather vane one direction one year and a weather vane another direction another year, like that doesn't excite me. That's not something that, as someone on the center, I'm like, oh yeah, I feel really represented and understood by this person. Seeing her have these, yeah, well, you're right that her response on the border was pretty incoherent because yeah, there were differences between her border plan and Trump's, sort of, but everyone recognized that immigration was a losing issue for Democrats, so they just kind of bit the bullet on that and were like, yeah, we want basically the same thing as you, but we want to say that you're stopping your thing from being enacted, and it was just unconvincing. It's unconvincing, and the reason it's unconvincing is because she was not she's not a centrist. The reason it's unconvincing is because Kamala Harris is a machine progressive politician who is in line with the institutional Democratic Party, and the institutional Democratic Party has been chasing the tail of its leftist and progressive staffers and trying to appeal to them. And then when it has elections, recognizing that the electorate doesn't really want that, but it can't authentically and seriously message from the position of someone like me. And objectively, at this point, I'm afraid, like you're saying, I'm punching left and everything. I am, but I am center left at this point. I voted for Harris, where a majority of the country voted for Trump. I am someone in the space of people that the Democratic Party needs to speak to.
Yeah,
And
as did I though, and I didn't really see anybody. And maybe this is a little bit more just puzzling right now because I don't even really know exactly where your issues are with the left. I know Wick more than his issues with the left more than yours. So
Well, give us your top
um,
three while you're here. Top three issues with
yeah.
the left. Go ahead.
Oh, my top three issues with the left. I would say my top one issue, again, this goes to education. I think that the education system is dominated by progressive educators, and they're basically wrong top to bottom about everything they think about education. Like, give me an example, they're probably wrong on it. And number two issue with it, I think that there is this sort of stultifying the Omnicause thing, the whole Omnicause thing, I just think is a fundamentally misguided approach. I think that you need to be able to approach things policy by policy, and you need to be able to seriously address things. So there's this impulse towards purity with it, where it has tried very, very hard to get people to shut up about things they disagree with it on, and act like it's all a big happy family
Yeah,
on
like
board.
accusing
all these
people of
causes.
being paid by the right if they don't agree with you. But
Yeah, things like that. And look, that's
Well,
something
again,
that
Rick,
I
you
think
did
is,
throw in a lot of the same talking points Trump has over the years. So,
if someone is right, they're right. If they're wrong, they're wrong. I don't check if there's a D or an R next to their name before I decide whether they're right or they're wrong. I see,
well,
are they right
it's
or are
not
they wrong?
right or wrong. Do you think
yeah.
Trump's policies against these groups are wrong?
What?
I think some
Which
policies are
policies?
on some of
I
them.
mean, right. I mean, because from the way you're talking about the left, you seem like you should be a Trump voter.
Yeah, and the way I'm talking about Trump, I'm not a Trump voter.
No, not you, Wick, but
We have our guest on. Let's focus on that. But I also didn't vote for Trump. I've never voted for a right winger in my life. I don't know what you're saying, right? Like, why should I be a Trump voter if, again, I'm a progressive. I'm a center-left progressive. I like open immigration more than closed borders, right? I like things like social security programs, things like that. I like Medicare for all. I believe climate change is real, right? But when it comes to like social issues specifically, such as DEI and things like that, I think that we're just wrong on these things. And when it comes to like free speech, like the right isn't great at free speech, but the left ain't either. And I'd like one day to be able to vote for a candidate who is good at free speech, but haven't had
I
that.
don't know if we're actually at free speech, because it seems like whoever's got controls that, and they're always
Yeah,
happy to
there's
have
a
the
problem. Do you have
opposition.
anything else for our guests? Because we do have a little bit of a line. I don't mean to cut you off, man, but
I I guess just yeah. Do you think it's possible that the division is going to just make things worse? Because in my opinion, um, I think we went through this election cycle. We were fighting with each other, and I don't know how pointing fingers and yelling at each other is going to fix that problem. It's not going to motivate our side to come together. Do you have any messages towards like why you think that right now is the right time to be pointing fingers?
Yeah, why is right now the time for pointing fingers? Because we are at the end of the Obama era. Because it died an ignominious death with Joe Biden having like clinging onto his campaign until he could no longer, with Kamala Harris being not the candidate that anyone on like your portion of the left was excited about, and certainly not the candidate that like I was excited about. That was just like trying to coast on fumes of this Democratic Party machine. That new ideas are needed, and not just new ideas, but a certain injection of energy is needed. And one faction, sorry,
just real quick before you keep going, like you've turned into I don't know what's wrong with your audio, but it's suddenly really bad.
Yeah, your voice is robotic.
Yeah. Okay, I was working.
It was working fine until 30 seconds ago.
Maybe like unplug your mic and plug it
The
back in.
left, the CIA got him, gang. Okay, they heard him talk about centrism and they couldn't have it.
Yeah. No, I'm hearing the audio issues from you guys. I didn't know it was a my end thing. Let me.
Here, tell you what. Do you want to switch back to your computer, real quick, and then we'll just go with you having the icon, and then we can hear you because that's the most important.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I will do that.
Cool. So hold on, but I'll let him answer your question in a sec. But Infallible Foul, if you want to have issues with like my takes and stuff, I'm going to do a call-in show this week, probably tomorrow. Call in tomorrow, and we'll talk. Cool.
All right.
Okay, I'll see you later, buddy.
See ya.
Okay. Let's test the audio.
All right.
Oh, we can
you hear
hear
me?
you. It's working.
Beautiful. Okay. So,
Yes.
sorry for the technical issues.
All good.
And in terms of why now is the time, someone needs to set a vision for the future. right now, Trump is in charge of the Republican Party, and he's not going anywhere with that. Like, they had their biggest electoral success in decades, and they are united around his vision, or as united as a party really gets. It would be like opposing Obama in the Democratic Party. The Democrats do not have that right now. And so, for someone like me who is frustrated with the current state of politics, who's frustrated with the things that have been offered and options that have been established, and who doesn't feel like the politicians in the Democratic Party were speaking to my needs or hearing the concerns of people like me, the time is now to become visible, to become clear, to become organized, to say, no, these are the specific things, these are the things we want. And quite frankly, why is it time to fight against some things in the left? Because I don't like everything in the left, because I don't think the left is right about everything. And if I have this as my option, if I have this as my coalition, I want to be able to address, here are the things that we can unite on, here are the things that we can't unite on, and actually hash out those arguments and actually hash out those debates without pretending to be cozy and get along between, say, socialism and liberalism. Like
to kind of piggyback off of that, I would rather be in a party that allows for people to disagree vociferously than one that asks you to shut up because it might hurt us in the next election, right? Like, I would, as an ideal world, I would rather be in the party that allows people to be unhappy and to express their dissatisfaction, because there is always a chance we're doing something wrong and we need to fix it. So that would be my response. But we got a couple more callers. Let's get through them. We can't see you. Your camera is just forever loading on that. I don't know what's going on, but
I'll just stick with the icon.
we will just roll with what we got. Let's get through these last ones here. You are live, sir, or ma'am. I'm not sure.
I am live. Hey,
what you
thanks,
got?
Wick. I'm not sure what I have. I took up your call, your clarion call for chatters to get backstage and get on panels. So I think maybe just a couple of brief things, which is one, I'm not sure why we're quibbling, wringing our hands, or otherwise upsetting ourselves over the level of polarization amongst the electorate. Look, the natural state of things is not just division, but polarization. That's what it means to have ideas. That's what it means to be able to think through concepts and principles and apply your values.
Well, I think what people are just, because I know where you're going with this, but when I say I don't like the level of polarization, what I'm talking about is the level of polarization that isn't just different ideas, but that you see the other team as the enemy, in such that you cancel Thanksgiving and Christmas because your husband voted for a different candidate. That's the level of polarization that I think I have a problem with. I can't speak for Trace here, but that's me.
I'd characterize that as something different than polarization. I'd go so far as to characterize that as something more akin to hatred. The knee-jerk reflexive approach to labeling or characterizing someone you disagree with as racist, activist, a genocider, these sorts of things. You're no longer engaged in rational discourse. You're engaged in spreading hatred, and you're not just dividing people. No, you're trying to smear people. And in the best case scenario for that side, and I usually see progressives doing this mostly, is to exclude these people from the public square, exclude them from the political process, to shame them away from these spaces. And that's not polarizing. That's not division. That's just hatred. It's just an expression of hatred. So that's what we should wring our hands about.
I want to hear what Trace has to say about this. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think I will defend simple polarization as an issue as well, in the sense of going back to the idea of centrism, I really do actually think it is important for people to be governed by politicians that are aiming to be politicians for the entire country. Politicians who are happy with the populace they have, who aren't wishing for a different populace. And as you have a more polarized country, people don't naturally polarize in that way. I mean, the more cohesive messaging gets and the more it spreads, the more people will naturally spread into two different camps. But if you have the government of a country switching between two deeply, fundamentally, bitterly opposed things year after year after year, then it becomes harder and harder to make progress on a lot of things that, or to have any sense of stability, to have any sense of like people can be comfortable that what has been happening will happen, and to have any sense of continuity, because everyone will just spend all their time reversing what the other guys are doing, and I think there's harm there. But yeah, I do think that there is, in addition, a harm on top of that to simply people really hating each other. Like you don't want to have a country where half the country really hates the other half of the country, just like authentically, deeply despises the values and the ideas of them and doesn't really interact. That's the sort of thing that isn't a stable state.
Response, and then
Or I think there's also the point about you just made the comment about elected political officials representing everyone, and I think what's happened is representing everyone has moved in such or shifted in such a way that means representing all special interests. And I think this is one of the consequences of the idiotic identity politics game that has grown and evolved over the last couple of decades, where you can no longer represent the country. Instead, you have to try to be representative of and try to represent all of these special interest groups. And I don't think that's possible to do. And rather than accepting that, instead, I think activists or members of these special interest groups then simply throw their hands up and say, well, you don't represent me, you don't want to represent me, therefore you are racist, you are sexist, you are a bigot, etc. All of these things are toxic and corrosive to the entire political process, and I'm not sure what you might think how to repair that.
How do we solve the polarization crisis, Trace? Go ahead.
Yeah. Look, if everyone just listens to me and follows my ideas and does what I want them to do instead of what everyone else wants them to do, then we'll all be happy. I think everyone can agree on that. No, in seriousness, I think there is something to this idea of interest groups and such, but really, I just think part of it is a process of accepting that interests need to be balanced, of really internalizing that interests need to be balanced, really internalizing that. So, for example, and people ask sometimes what I disagree with the left on. People would say, oh, you absolutely need to support trans people, you need to support gay people, you need to support every specific interest group, whatever. And I think you should say, yes, you support them, but you balance their interests alongside other people's interests, and you make it acceptable to speak directly to people's interests and to acknowledge that people's interests legitimately diverge and sometimes legitimately come into tension with each other. And you have to be able to, candidly address that there are a lot of different interests that are trading off against each other versus treating everything as there are no trade-offs. There is only one direction of obvious progress that must always happen. And another thing I would say is also explicitly learning from the past with things. So a lot of times people propose policies that you have a long history, a long track record of this has been tried here, 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 and here. These were the errors here, these were the errors here, these were the errors here. If you want to say keep doing the same thing or return to the same thing at some point, you should be aware of and consciously addressing here is why it will be different than those prior times. Be aware of the specifics of how it has fallen apart and just get really tangible. Most people don't care about the nuts and bolts of policy. They want things to just be vaguely sensible. So if they see someone who is really seriously diving into all those nuts and bolts and really grappling with trade-offs, visibly grappling with trade-offs, visibly addressing trade-offs, visibly understanding prior errors and things like that, at some point, I think most people reach a point where they're like, okay, I can basically trust this. They've thought through things, and that's basically fine. Not everyone, but 80% of people are going to be 80% comfortable with something like that. I think.
I think I disagree with you on this, Trace. I think that my fear, at least, is that most people will see that and they will think, oh, this guy doesn't have a conviction. He's not convicted in his belief, right? And they will look at reasonable people such as all the people in this call would absolutely see it as you do. But I worry that at least a growing portion of the electorate is not reasonable.
Yeah, I think you want to speak to people's values. Yes, I like, technical, technocratic, whatever, yada,
Yes.
yada. But I also try to lead with my values and lead with my beliefs and lead with, here's why I am passionate about these things. You can be both passionate and precise. You can be both passionate and nitpicky on the details. You can be both passionate and specific, and you can be both passionate and acknowledge trade-offs. So, and I think people need to learn to be that. Like you don't want to get rid of the passion. And I try to be extremely passionate about things, particularly on Twitter, particularly, in some of the brawls I get in, some of the fights. Like I make it very clear where I stand, but I also try to be ready to understand where other people are coming from, to back down into the nuances, to get into the details, to really get into the weeds with things. And I think you can balance them. I do.
Okay. Well, thank you for calling in, Beaverton
Yeah,
Commuter.
thanks, Wick. You guys have a good one.
Yeah, have a great day. Okay. Let's see. We got one more guy here. Let's see what Meme has to say. Okay, Meme, you're up.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah. What do you got for us?
Awesome. Well, Wick, I'm responding to one of the callouts with the whole chat being YouTube chat in this case, being an uproar on the Brett Weinstein thing. So
Go ahead.
I'm going to hop in here.
Fantastic.
I think there's I kind of label almost the Brett Weinsteins, the Jordan Petersons, and even like to a certain extent the Alex Jones.
I like
into,
Jordan
like,
Peterson. I'm fond of Jordan Peterson,
Okay.
but carry on.
But into like an almost overcorrection of like a type 1 versus type 2 error scenario where you want to eliminate false positives, but they're incredibly scared about false negatives. And so even in the example that you gave where okay, kind of linking this foreign political actor to being assassinated by the World Health Organization or something crazy like that, right? As wild of a claim as it is, if the end result of one of those wild claims ends up just being, hey, a bunch of lunatics essentially created a new system in which we get a slightly better read on the inner working of some closed system that previously wasn't available, like the FOIA system or something like that, that becomes as a result, I would argue that though that classification of people is actually super necessary for ongoing trust in governmental institutions, because without them you wouldn't even have like record keeping or these things that a too trusting society of that willing to handle those false negatives would just overlook.
Take a shot at it.
Yeah. I think that that's a really thoughtful and a really good defense of something superficially similar to Brett Weinstein. I don't think it's a strong defense of Brett Weinstein in specific, and the reason is the level of confidence people give to claims. And yeah, this applies to Alex Jones also. Ones like that, where it is helpful to inject unlikely ideas into the public consciousness, and it is helpful for some people to be on alert to a lot of those things and be curious about a lot of those things. What I find unhelpful and destructive is getting a large group really, really, really convinced that something definitely is happening. So say like Alex Jones with the whole Sandy Hook fiasco. Like when you just spin things out of thin air and get a lot of people to trust that and to take action based on something you're spinning out of thin air versus there are some odd things. I like investigating odd coincidences and seeing what pops up and understanding that I'm going to be wrong about a lot of it, but acknowledging that I'm going to be wrong about it. I think that a lot of people like this get high on their own supply and become convinced that they really are the only one who sees the fabric of all of these underlying things, and that they really do have this, are in this unique position to speak truth while all the others are not, where they get really caught up in careless thinking and encouraging others to become really, really committed to careless thinking. And I think there's no better example of this than Donald Trump with the stolen election stuff, where, yes, conservatives had, the smartest conservatives I could point to will point to, this election security thing or this election security thing and say, oh, there's certainly some sort of legitimate concern in there, isn't it? But Trump wasn't, looking for a legitimate concern. He was throwing every possible thing at the wall. Anything that showed any hint of being aligned with his narrative, he was throwing it at the wall and working people up into a frenzy over believing all of those things. And I think that way lies madness. You can't just throw everything at the wall and rely on the public to act sensibly with it, and people who are whipping people up about every single possible thing they can throw at the wall, I think are doing the public a disservice.
Before you respond, I'll let you respond. $5 from Portland is Burning to say, why are people so eager to call out divisive labeling on the left while the right labels everything they don't like communist, Marxist, groomer, etc.? But no, Meme, if you'd like to respond, by all means.
No, I think it's that's definitely a good pushback. I would say that it's interesting because you got to do it the whole like case by case basis on this one. I hate to fall back on that, but like when I look at some of the stuff, you look at like examples brought up in particular, the Sandy Hook one. I try not to nitpick on this one, but like for that example, right? This is talking more of like a civil case, in which case I would say making stuff civilly about like individual citizens might fall into a completely different category than something like civilian talking about a governmental system. Then you go into the Donald Trump stuff, where once again we go into like this is actually a governmental figure challenging internal governmental processes at like a national level, and so that's like another overblown thing. I think like if Brett Weinstein was elected to a position of power, saw the inner workings, and then continued on like this tirade and was throwing serious levers while actually being witness to the levers of power, I think that your argument, I guess, would be more convincing to me. But I almost draw certain distinctions in this.
Can I ask you, Mehmet, since you seem much more familiar with Brett Weinstein, I think, than I am, you at least it appears that you're being tacitly defensive of him. I'll ask you this. When has Brett Weinstein ever publicly admitted to being wrong on a thing? And what thing was that? And I ask you this question because that's one of the markers that I look at when I'm trying to figure out if I should listen to someone. Are they willing to admit when they are wrong, and are they willing to publicly say that they're wrong?
Off the top of my head, I honestly can't give you the answer on that one, but I'd have to look it up.
Sure, if you find it, you can DM me, right? But that's one of the problems I have with a lot of the so-called like truth tellers out there, is they just say things, and whether it ends up being right or wrong, they just keep saying it, and they keep saying it, and they keep saying it, and yeah, if you're not willing to take the L when you're wrong about something, I mean, why should I ever trust you?
Yeah. And I have two other things to add that I think will be informative. One,
please.
I don't have the same problem with Joe Rogan. And Rogan goes into all sorts of weird conspiratorial rabbit holes, but he's basically just like a curious dude. He's not like deeply committed to anything. He's just like, he's talking with people, he's chatting with people, he's diving down, I'm curious about this, and he doesn't set himself forth as an expert in things who everyone should trust with those things. That's number one. Number two is I think nature invented a habitat for someone like Brett Weinstein, and that habitat is Evergreen State College, an out-of-the-way, small, somewhat kooky community college type vibe where you have this kind of crazy professor who goes on weird tangents and is suspicious of everything and has his theories of everything and his grand ideas. He was a perfect professor there. And then this progressive group got mad at him and kicked him out and unleashed him on the rest of the world. And he was this invasive species released on an unprepared populace, ready to, give them the whole like small liberal arts college professor experience on a big stage with him being extremely confident he's right about everything. And, I think he was doing great in his niche, and I think he should have stayed in that niche, but I don't trust him as a guru over millions of people.
Anything else, Mehmet?
Yeah, I think that's fair. No, I mean, I think those are fair criticisms of Brett. Like, I don't think he's a perfect person, but I hate to do it once again, but I almost fall on the whole, I would rather a suspicious populace when it comes to governmental institutions. Probably, as you can read, I'm more like a libertarian-leaning individual than I am, like, for, I guess, over-trusting people who are, like, overconfident in institutions. And I think that category of person helps bolster that.
Oh.
Not necessarily because I want like the institution overthrown, but because I think that healthy skepticism in the institution creates regulations that otherwise wouldn't, that allow you to monitor.
That's just it. Healthy skepticism. And I think we can all view the difference between a healthy skeptic of, let's check into the what this institution is saying, are they actually correct? What are the methodology they're using? Versus I think there are FEMA assassins and snipers killing anyone who tries to get aid. Yeah, there's a difference between these types of skepticisms.
Not true.
Fair enough. Okay.
But yeah, great thoughts.
Yeah, no, thanks for calling in, buddy. And I will talk to you later. Okay.
Good.
To the void. Okay. Well, I want to respect your time. It's been about 2 hours. We are out of callers for now. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you really wanted to? Any kind of topic that you've really been wanting to talk about that we haven't yet?
I think that we have covered plenty of ground, and I've already, talked people's ears off about enough of my passions. I dive down all sorts of rabbit holes. There are all sorts of places I could go. But what I'll say is, if you like the sort of things I talk about and the sort of rabbit holes I dive down, like I'm around on Twitter at Tracingwoodgrains and on Substack as Tracingwoodgrains.
Check him out, gang. I have a link to his stuff in my YouTube description. Please, he took the time to come on the show, talk to us, and share his thoughts. The least you can do is give him a follow. It's free, okay? If you've enjoyed the conversation and if you've enjoyed the content, and I see you guys out there giving me super chats, so I know you do, continue to pay me because I want your money. That is what you are to me, little pocketbooks that I will extract wealth from. And like the stream, that you can do for free. Subscribe to the channel, really help me out. So what do we got coming up? Tomorrow I'm just doing call-in show, easy peasy. Wednesday we're going to talk about Blue Sky and the siloing effect of media and social media. That should be a fun conversation. And then on Friday I'm going to be having a debate on tariffs with some Trumpers. That should be fun. Have a happy Thanksgiving if I don't see you again. Tracing, thank you again for coming on, and we're going to say bye. Bye.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Hope you enjoyed it, gang. Let's see. Who are we rating it to? Who's streaming? I don't really see any. Rora's streaming. Let's go to Rora. And I'll see you guys tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern. Should be fun. Oh, is Lonerbox streaming on YouTube? I can try to set that up. Give me a second. Loner box. Talking with H3. Ooh. Oh, redirect privileges are needed. I can't redirect. He's not letting me. That's sad. Okay, well. See you guys later.